In the vast expanse of the galaxy, where stars stretched endlessly and countless planets thrived with life, humanity had begun to carve its place among the most powerful civilizations. For centuries, humans had looked up at the night sky with wonder, dreaming about the stars, imagining what lay beyond the tiny blue planet they called home. These dreams were once just fantasies, filled with stories of adventure, exploration, and the hope of contacting beings from other worlds. But over time, humanity's dreams transformed into reality. Through relentless innovation, determination, and a thirst for knowledge, humans developed technologies that allowed them to travel faster than light, explore distant star systems, and communicate across vast distances in the galaxy. Unlike other civilizations that had existed for millennia, humanity was young. Their history was brief in comparison, but it was intense, filled with rapid advancements and a constant struggle for survival. Earth itself had been a proving ground, a place where humans learned to adapt, innovate, and overcome seemingly insurmountable challenges. Wars, natural disasters, and societal upheavals had shaped humanity, making them resilient and unpredictable. By the time they reached the stars, humans were no longer simply explorers. They were pioneers, ready to claim their position among the galaxy's elite civilizations. The Galactic Council, a governing body made up of representatives from multiple advanced alien species, had long dominated interstellar politics. They were the lawmakers, the diplomats, and the mediators, tasked with maintaining peace, trade agreements, and order throughout countless star systems. To the Council, humanity was fascinating yet puzzling. On one hand, humans had shown immense intelligence, creativity, and the ability to adapt. On the other hand, their impulsive and often emotional nature made them difficult to predict. The Council had dealt with thousands of species over the centuries, most of which were patient, logical, and deeply rooted in tradition. Humanity, with its rapid rise and aggressive curiosity, was unlike anything the Council had ever encountered. At first, the Council tried to approach humanity as they would any other species. Ambassadors were sent, treaties were offered, and the usual diplomatic protocols were followed. Humans attended council meetings, listened to advice, and appeared to comply with rules. The Council believed they could guide humanity just as they had guided others, expecting them to follow the established path of diplomacy, restraint, and cooperation. But humans were different. They were not inclined to blindly follow orders or bow to authority without reason. Their history had taught them the importance of questioning, resisting, and, if necessary, challenging those in power. These traits, which had allowed humans to survive and thrive on Earth, would soon define their approach to interstellar relations. Within human society, opinions were divided. Some believed that the best way to survive and succeed in the galaxy was through cooperation, following the Council's guidance, and slowly building alliances. They argued that diplomacy was essential, that the galaxy was vast and dangerous, and that patience would ensure long-term success. Others, however, were restless and ambitious. They saw the Council's rules as restrictive, their slow processes as frustrating, and their assumptions about human compliance as insulting. These humans believed that to truly assert themselves in the galaxy, they needed to act independently, to develop their own strategies, and to make decisions without waiting for approval from an alien governing body that often seemed detached from the realities of human ambition. The Council's miscalculation stemmed from underestimating this growing desire for autonomy. They assumed that because humanity was still young in galactic terms, it would be easier to control, guide, or influence them. They believed that human leaders, accustomed to negotiation and compromise, would continue to engage in the formalities of diplomacy, no matter how slow or cumbersome. This assumption was not unreasonable. From a distance, humans did appear to follow protocols, sending diplomats and participating in council sessions with respect. But what the Council failed to see was that humans were simultaneously preparing for independence, quietly building their capabilities, and cultivating the resources and alliances needed to operate on their own terms. Humanity's growth in technology had been nothing short of extraordinary. They had developed spacecraft capable of interstellar travel, weapons systems designed for both defense and deterrence, and communication networks that allowed instantaneous contact across light years. These advancements gave humans confidence that they could challenge the status quo if they chose to. Unlike many species that relied on tradition and long-standing hierarchies, humans were adaptive, inventive, and unafraid to take risks. They understood that true power in the galaxy did not come merely from following rules, but from the ability to act decisively, to innovate, and to seize opportunities that others might overlook. This combination of rapid technological growth, cultural adaptability, and ambitious drive made humans both intriguing and threatening to the Galactic Council. While the Council publicly praised humanity's achievements, internally, there were heated debates among its members. Some representatives argued that humans should be guided and nurtured, brought into the fold slowly to avoid conflict. Others believed that humans were already too independent, and their potential for rebellion or non-compliance posed a serious risk to interstellar stability. These disagreements highlighted a fundamental flaw in the Council's understanding. They assumed that compliance was a natural response to authority, not recognizing that humans had been shaped by centuries of struggle and competition, teaching them to value autonomy over blind obedience. Humans, for their part, observed the council with a mix of curiosity and caution. They studied its protocols, analyzed its patterns, and tested its assumptions. They understood the importance of diplomacy not as a tool to submit, but as a means to gain insight, gather intelligence, and strengthen their own position. Human leaders recognized that a direct confrontation with the council would be risky, yet they also saw an opportunity to redefine their place in the galaxy. They could participate in interstellar politics while simultaneously building the power and influence necessary to assert independence when the time was right. On Earth and in human-controlled colonies across nearby star systems, a sense of pride and ambition began to grow. Citizens and leaders alike were inspired by the idea that humanity could become a major galactic power, one that was respected not only for its technology but also for its courage, ingenuity, and willingness to challenge convention. Stories of past human achievements landing on distant planets, surviving hostile environments, and outsmarting opponents in trade or exploration were retold with a new sense of purpose. Humanity's history of resilience became the foundation for its vision of the future, a galaxy where humans would no longer be mere participants in a larger system but active shapers of its direction. As humans continued to advance, the Galactic Council remained confident in its ability to manage the situation. They did not see humanity's subtle preparations for independence, assuming that the formalities of diplomacy were sufficient to ensure compliance. This overconfidence would later prove to be a critical mistake. The Council's calculations were based on centuries of experience with other species, yet they failed to account for humanity's unique combination of creativity, ambition, and unpredictability. In their eyes, humans were a young species that could be guided, influenced, and controlled, an assumption that ignored the very essence of human nature. By the time the first signs of tension began to appear, it was already too late for the Council to adjust their expectations. Humans had quietly expanded their fleets, strengthened their colonies, and developed independent communication and defense networks. They had formed alliances with select civilizations outside the Council's direct influence and were ready to assert their autonomy if provoked. The groundwork for a future conflict, or at least a dramatic shift in galactic diplomacy, had been laid. Though the Council remained unaware of the full extent of human preparation, the story of humanity's rise in this period is one of ambition, strategy, and the careful balancing of diplomacy with preparation for independence. Humans learned to navigate the complexities of interstellar politics without sacrificing their ultimate goal to establish themselves as a power that could act on its own terms. Theirs was a lesson in patience, observation, and the quiet accumulation of strength, all while maintaining the appearance of compliance to avoid unnecessary conflict. Humanity was no longer just a participant in the galaxy. They were an emerging force, quietly reshaping the rules of engagement. The Galactic Council, confident in its assumptions, continued to operate as if humanity would follow the path laid out for them. Yet beneath the surface, humans were preparing to challenge every expectation, every rule, and every calculation. This period of introduction and background sets the stage for the coming conflicts, showing a species ready to abandon convention and assert itself in ways the galaxy had never seen before. After humanity had established itself as a rising power in the galaxy, the initial interactions with the Galactic Council were marked by careful observation and tentative engagement. At first, humans appeared willing to follow the established protocols of interstellar diplomacy. Their representatives attended council sessions, listened to debates between alien species, and submitted reports and proposals according to the Council's standards. From the perspective of the Galactic Council, humanity seemed cooperative and respectful of the rules, participating in discussions with measured tones and cautious gestures. It was easy for the Council to assume that humans were like other civilizations they had encountered, ambitious, but ultimately predictable and willing to play by the established rules. However, beneath this apparent compliance, humans were quietly assessing the Council and its methods. They observed the strengths and weaknesses of its members, noting how decisions were delayed, how some species dominated discussions, and how the Council often made compromises that left smaller or newer civilizations disadvantaged. Humans learned quickly that the Council's focus on formalities, tradition, and procedural correctness sometimes came at the expense of efficiency, fairness, or security. From this, a subtle but powerful sense of skepticism grew among human leaders. They realized that while diplomacy was necessary to maintain peace and gather information, it was not always a tool that could guarantee human interests would be protected in human society. This period was one of balancing two opposing strategies. On the one hand, diplomats, negotiators, and politicians worked tirelessly to maintain positive relations with the Council. They ensured that humans were seen as reasonable and cooperative, sending envoys to meetings, participating in debates, and making formal gestures of goodwill. They signed minor treaties, provided information about human colonies, and even contributed to interstellar initiatives led by other species. This outwardly cooperative behavior reassured the Council and other civilizations that humanity could be trusted to follow the expected path. At the same time, a parallel strategy was unfolding. Humans began quietly building their independent capabilities, focusing on areas that would allow them to act autonomously if diplomacy failed or if the Council attempted to limit human expansion. This included secretly enhancing their fleets, developing advanced technologies, and establishing colonies in regions beyond immediate Council oversight. Humans also forged alliances with civilizations that were either neutral or slightly skeptical of the Council's dominance. These alliances were often subtle and carefully concealed, allowing humans to test the waters without attracting undue attention. It was a careful dance, 1 foot in diplomacy, 1 foot in preparation for independence, both moving forward simultaneously. Humanity's dual approach created a unique tension. Internally, leaders debated constantly about how much to reveal and how much to hide. Some believed that absolute transparency and cooperation would earn respect and avoid conflict. Others argued that the Council could never fully understand or respect humans if they remained confined to established protocols. They believed that secrecy and preparation were essential, because the Council's assumptions about human predictability could be used against them if humans ever sought to assert independence. This internal debate shaped every action, every treaty, and every diplomatic encounter during this early period. Meanwhile, the Council continued to treat humans as a cooperative young species. They praised human contributions, noting their technological achievements and rapid growth. Council members were impressed by human adaptability and ingenuity, but they still assumed that humans would act within the frameworks of diplomacy. The Council underestimated the human tendency to question authority and the impatience that came from centuries of rapid development and survival on a challenging home planet. Humans were not inclined to simply follow orders or wait for bureaucratic decisions. They preferred to act decisively and strategically, even when others were slow to respond. As human colonies spread across nearby star systems, a new layer of complexity emerged. Many colonies were remote, self-sufficient, and partially autonomous, giving humans a broader perspective on the galaxy and the Council's influence. Some colonies operated quietly outside the Council's immediate oversight, experimenting with new technologies and trade systems, and developing local governance structures that emphasized efficiency and resilience. These colonies were testing grounds for human innovation, allowing humanity to learn from success and failure without exposing themselves to direct scrutiny. The Council assumed these colonies were under full compliance, but humans knew that independence could not be measured solely by appearances. Communication became a critical tool during this period. Humans learned to navigate the Council's expectations while simultaneously transmitting sensitive information internally. They shared intelligence about other species' behaviors, potential threats, and opportunities for expansion. This dual communication strategy allowed humans to maintain a public image of cooperation while building a private network of knowledge, alliances, and resources. The Council remained unaware of the full scope of human preparation, believing that standard monitoring and reporting systems were sufficient to ensure compliance. Humanity's growing technological capabilities also played a major role in the early situation, which ships became faster, more resilient, and more adaptable, capable of defending themselves or projecting power if necessary. Artificial intelligence systems improved decision-making, resource management, and fleet coordination. Scientists developed new energy sources and weapons, not for immediate aggression, but to ensure that humans could act decisively if confronted with threats or limitations imposed by the Council. Every advancement reinforced human confidence, making it clear that diplomacy could be a choice rather than a necessity. Social and cultural developments also reflected this early period of careful balancing. Human society was becoming increasingly aware of its own identity and potential. Stories of exploration, discovery, and resilience were celebrated, inspiring both leaders and ordinary citizens to imagine a future where humans could operate freely among the stars. Education systems emphasized strategic thinking, problem-solving, and adaptability, ensuring that future generations would be capable of independent decision-making. Humanity's early interactions with the Council were shaping a new culture, one that valued diplomacy as a tool, not a constraint, and that celebrated independence and innovation as core virtues. Despite the outward appearance of calm and cooperation, tensions were growing beneath the surface. Small disputes over trade, resource rights, and territorial boundaries began to appear, though they were often framed as minor technicalities rather than outright confrontations. The Council expected humans to respond predictably, either by accepting rulings or engaging in formal negotiation. Instead, humans were beginning to quietly assert their perspectives, challenge minor assumptions, and test the limits of Council authority. These actions were subtle but significant, laying the groundwork for more decisive moves in the future. The early situation also revealed the human approach to alliances. While many civilizations relied on long-standing treaties and historical loyalties, humans were strategic and flexible. They formed relationships with civilizations that offered mutual benefit, Even if these alliances contradicted the Council's expectations, humans valued practicality over tradition, willing to cooperate with some species while withholding cooperation from others if it served their long-term interests. This pragmatic approach was a significant departure from the Council's assumptions, which were rooted in predictability and precedent. As humans navigated this early period, they were learning lessons about power, influence, and diplomacy that would shape their future actions. They understood that the Council was powerful, but not omniscient, that appearances could be deceiving, and that patience, observation, and preparation were as important as formal agreements. This period of cautious engagement allowed humans to gather information, strengthen capabilities, and refine strategies, all while maintaining the facade of compliance. By the end of this phase, humanity had positioned itself as both a cooperative member of the galactic community and a quietly independent force, ready to act if circumstances required. In this way, the early situation was a critical period of duality for humanity. They learned to participate in interstellar diplomacy without surrendering autonomy. They've built capabilities and alliances without provoking conflict. They observed the Council's weaknesses and planned for contingencies, all while maintaining the appearance of predictability. This careful balancing act would define humanity's next moves, setting the stage for rising tensions and the eventual abandonment of traditional diplomacy. Humanity had successfully established a presence in the galaxy, gained the Council's trust, and laid the foundations for future independence. The seeds of conflict were sown not through aggression, but through foresight, strategy, and the refusal to be fully constrained by external authority. The early situation, with its careful diplomacy and quiet preparation, marked a turning point in humanity's rise, a time when they were no longer just observers of galactic politics, but active participants shaping their own destiny. As humanity continued to establish itself among the stars, tensions with the Galactic Council began to grow in ways that were subtle at first but became increasingly difficult to ignore. While humans had maintained a facade of cooperation during the early period of diplomacy, beneath the surface, a quiet rebellion of thought and action was taking shape. Human leaders understood that the galaxy was not a neutral playground. It was governed by entities with long-standing traditions, power structures, and rigid expectations. These entities, led by the Galactic Council, had long believed in their ability to control, guide, or influence new civilizations. Yet humans were no ordinary species. They were unpredictable, ambitious, and driven by a desire to secure their own destiny. The first signs of conflict appeared in minor disputes that the Council initially dismissed as inconsequential. These included disagreements over trade regulations, territorial boundaries, and the management of newly discovered resources. At first, Council members assumed that humans would comply with established protocols or, at the very least, accept minor sanctions without resistance. However, human responses were not as expected. Instead of passively accepting rulings, human representatives challenged the Council's decisions, questioning the fairness and logic of its judgments. While these challenges were polite and framed within diplomatic language, they revealed a growing impatience and a willingness to assert independence. Human colonies also played a role in escalating tensions. Many of these colonies were remote, far from Council oversight, and had grown accustomed to the Council expected uniform compliance across all human territories, but these colonies operated experimenting with trade agreements, defense protocols, and alliances that did not always align with the Council's directives. When the Council attempted to enforce its authority, humans responded with a combination of negotiation, defiance, and strategic maneuvering. They did not resort to open hostility, but they demonstrated that compliance was optional, not guaranteed. A turning point in the rising conflict occurred when the Council imposed sanctions on a human colony accused of violating interstellar trade regulations. The colony, located on a resource-rich planet on the edge of explored space, had engaged in commerce that the Council deemed illegal. Humans, however, argued that the regulations were outdated and unfair, designed to favor older, more established civilizations. The Council expected that the threat of sanctions, restriction of trade, fines, and public reprimands would be enough to ensure obedience. Instead, the colony, supported by human leadership on a broader scale, resisted the measures. They continued their operations, arguing publicly that their actions were justified and within their rights. This defiance marked a critical shift. It was no longer a matter of minor disagreements or misunderstandings. Humans were openly challenging the authority of the Galactic Council. This challenge sent shockwaves through interstellar politics. Other species began to watch closely, curious about how humans would respond to the Council's sanctions. Some were impressed by human courage and strategic thinking, while others were concerned that such defiance could destabilize established systems of governance. The Council itself was caught off guard. Its members had assumed that humans, like other species before them, would eventually comply under pressure. The realization that humans might not be so easily controlled created anxiety and uncertainty among Council leaders. In response to the sanctions, Human diplomats escalated their efforts to assert independence while maintaining the appearance of diplomacy. They sent detailed communications to the Council when challenging the legal basis of the sanctions, highlighting inconsistencies in Council policies, and presenting alternative solutions that favored human interests. Each message was carefully crafted, blending reasoned argument with subtle warnings. Humans were willing to negotiate, but they would not be coerced. This strategic approach demonstrated that rising conflict did not require immediate aggression. It could be achieved through intelligence, careful planning, and a firm assertion of rights. At the same time, humans began mobilizing resources behind the scenes. Fleets were upgraded, defense systems enhanced, and colonies reinforced in preparation for potential confrontations. These preparations were not intended as provocations, they were precautionary measures, designed to ensure that humans could protect themselves if the Council attempted to escalate the situation. Humans understood the importance of balance. They did not want to start a war, but they would not allow themselves to be threatened or undermined. The Council, unaware of the full scope of human mobilization, continued to rely on assumptions of compliance and predictability. The rising conflict also exposed the Council's internal divisions. Some members advocated for stricter measures against humans, arguing that failure to enforce compliance would encourage rebellion among other species. They proposed stronger sanctions, patrols near human colonies, and the threat of military intervention. Others urged caution, warning that humans were unlike any species they had encountered. They recognized that human ingenuity, adaptability, and strategic thinking could make them formidable opponents if pushed too far. These debates highlighted a growing tension within the Council itself. While some members were confident in traditional methods of control, others were beginning to question whether those methods were effective against a species as unique and unpredictable as humanity. Humanity's approach to rising conflict was methodical and calculated. They did not rush into confrontation but used diplomacy as a tool to gain time, gather intelligence, and strengthen their position. Humans studied Council behavior, anticipating responses to their actions and identifying weaknesses in the Council's assumptions. They recognized that other civilizations often deferred to Council authority out of habit or fear, but humans relied on reasoning, adaptability, and preparation. This strategic mindset allowed them to escalate conflict on their terms, ensuring that any confrontation would be carefully controlled and advantageous to humanity. Meanwhile, tensions continued to grow in human colonies. Local leaders became increasingly frustrated with Council interference, viewing it as an attempt to limit human potential and exploit resources unfairly. Some colonies began forming their own networks of trade and communication, bypassing Council oversight whenever possible. These networks strengthened human cohesion and provided a foundation for coordinated action across vast distances. The Council, monitoring these developments, was aware of growing independence but underestimated its scale and sophistication. Humans had learned to hide their full capabilities, presenting an image of compliance while quietly building the tools needed to act autonomously in interstellar society. Humans' assertiveness began to shift perceptions. Other species, initially skeptical of humanity's abilities, started to recognize their potential. Stories of human colonies defying Council directives, navigating challenges with ingenuity, and negotiating favorable outcomes spread quickly. Some civilizations admired human courage, viewing it as a sign of leadership potential. Others grew wary, concerned that humans' willingness to challenge authority could upset the balance of power. In this way, rising conflict was not only a matter of direct disputes with the Council, it was also shaping humanity's reputation throughout the galaxy. As the situation intensified, minor skirmishes and confrontations began to emerge. These were not full-scale battles, but small incidents that tested human preparedness and Council authority. Disagreements over trade routes, border patrols, and resource rights sometimes resulted in standoffs, where fleets from both sides positioned themselves strategically without engaging in combat. These encounters served as warnings, demonstrating that humans were capable of defending their interests, and that the Council's assumptions of compliance were increasingly unreliable. Each standoff strengthened human confidence and highlighted the Council's underestimation of human capabilities. The rising conflict had reached a stage where simple negotiation was no longer sufficient. Humans were no longer content to follow instructions or accept minor concessions. They sought to assert their independence, protect their interests, and demonstrate that compliance with the Council was optional. This was a delicate balance. Humans wanted to avoid open war, yet they needed to communicate clearly that their patience had limits. Through careful strategy, diplomacy, and preparation, humans were able to escalate the conflict without crossing the threshold into full-scale aggression, leaving the Council increasingly anxious and unsure of how to respond. The rising conflict also revealed a crucial aspect of human society: unity through shared purpose. Across colonies, in fleets, and within diplomatic circles, humans coordinated actions and messaging to maintain consistency. They leveraged both technological and cultural advantages, using intelligence networks, rapid communication, and strategic alliances to strengthen their position. This level of coordination was unusual for a young species, and it further surprised the Council. Humans were demonstrating that rising conflict did not require chaos. It could be controlled, strategic, and highly effective. The rising conflict phase was a turning point in human history. It marked the transition from cautious engagement to active assertion, from compliance to strategic challenge. Humans had learned to navigate interstellar diplomacy while simultaneously preparing for independence. They had tested the Council's assumptions, highlighted weaknesses, and demonstrated that they could protect their interests without resorting to reckless aggression. The stage was set for future confrontations. With humans now confident in their ability to act decisively when the moment demanded, the galaxy was beginning to understand that humanity was no ordinary species. Their combination of intelligence, strategy, technological prowess, and willingness to challenge authority had positioned them as a formidable force. The Council, confident in their ability to maintain control, was starting to realize that their assumptions had been flawed. Humans were no longer simply participants in interstellar politics. They were becoming a power capable of shaping the future on their own terms. Rising conflict had revealed the true nature of humanity, a species ready to defend its independence, challenge authority, and change the rules of engagement across the galaxy. The situation between humanity and the Galactic Council had been building for years, moving from cautious diplomacy to rising tension. Small disputes, strategic defiance, and subtle displays of autonomy had gradually pushed the relationship to the edge. By the time of the breaking point, humanity was no longer willing to play by the Council's rules, and the Council had begun to realize that their assumptions about humans, being predictable and compliant, were dangerously flawed. What had once seemed like minor disagreements had grown into a full-blown confrontation of ideals, authority, and independence. The breaking point began with a Council-mandated treaty that demanded human colonies cede control of newly discovered star systems. These were resource-rich planets located on the frontier of human exploration. The Council argued that these systems fell under collective management to maintain stability, prevent conflicts between species, and ensure fair distribution of resources. From the Council's perspective, this was standard procedure and extension of centuries of governance across countless civilizations. They assumed humans would negotiate a compromise or, at worst, reluctantly accept the terms. Humans, however, saw this as overreach, an attempt to limit their growth and independence. They recognized that complying with the treaty would mean sacrificing not only resources but also autonomy, influence, and the strategic advantage they had carefully built. Human leaders understood that ceding control could set a dangerous precedent, signaling to other civilizations that humans could be contained or controlled. For humanity, the stakes were far higher than a single treaty. They were defending the right to determine their own destiny. When the treaty was formally presented, human representatives took an unprecedented step. Instead of entering negotiations or seeking a compromise, they publicly renounced the treaty. They sent detailed messages to the Galactic Council, explaining their position, justifying their decision, and asserting that human colonies would operate independently. The language was firm but diplomatic, emphasizing reason and logic rather than aggression. Humans made it clear that they were willing to continue peaceful interactions with the Council and other species, but only on their own terms. Compliance would no longer be automatic. This public renunciation shocked the interstellar community. Other civilizations, long accustomed to Council authority being followed, watched in disbelief as humans openly defied a ruling that had governed relations for centuries. Within the Council itself, panic and confusion spread. Some members called for immediate punitive action, arguing that humans needed to be reminded of the Council's power. Others, however, warned against rash moves. Recognizing that humans were not an ordinary species, they were capable, intelligent, and strategically prepared. The Council realized that pushing humans too far could trigger consequences. They were ill-equipped to handle. Meanwhile, humans were ready. In preparation for this moment, they had quietly expanded fleets, reinforced colonies, and strengthened alliances outside Council oversight. These measures were defensive, designed to protect human interests, but they also sent a clear signal: humanity would not back down under threat. For centuries, the Council had relied on the assumption that new or rising civilizations would eventually conform. Recognizing the wisdom or authority of the governing body, humanity shattered that assumption. They had grown beyond the need for the Council's permission, prepared to assert their power and autonomy, with precision and strategy. The breaking point was also defined by the way humans handled communication. Unlike previous disputes, where messages were cautious and measured, the communication at this stage was direct and assertive. Humans publicly explained their reasoning, framing their decision not as rebellion but as a natural step in their evolution as a galactic civilization. They emphasized fairness, efficiency, and strategic necessity, appealing to logic and reason rather than emotion. This approach was calculated. It allowed humans to maintain credibility and moral authority, while simultaneously challenging the Council's power. In addition to formal communications, humans began subtly reshaping interstellar alliances. They reached out to species who had been skeptical or neutral regarding council authority, demonstrating that human independence could be mutually beneficial. These alliances were carefully structured to ensure that humans had support and strategic depth if tensions escalated. By building networks outside council control, humanity created a safety net, ensuring that the breaking point did not become a catastrophe but rather a calculated assertion of power. On human colonies, the atmosphere was one of cautious optimism mixed with anticipation. Leaders prepared populations for the realities of independence, emphasizing the importance of unity, strategy, and vigilance. Citizens were aware that the council might respond harshly, yet they also understood that this moment represented the culmination of years of preparation, patience, and foresight. There was a collective sense that humanity was stepping into a new era, one where they would no longer be guided or restrained by outside authority but would shape their own future. As news of humanity's renunciation spread, reactions across the galaxy varied. Some species admired humans' courage, seeing them as a bold and innovative civilization willing to challenge entrenched systems. Others viewed the move with fear, concerned that human defiance could destabilize interstellar order or encourage similar actions by other rising civilizations. Within the council, debates raged about the best course of action. Some members wanted to impose strict sanctions or deploy military forces to enforce compliance. Others argued for negotiation and engagement, warning that military intervention could provoke resistance or even open conflict with the species they had underestimated. Despite the growing tension, humans were careful to avoid actions that could be perceived as reckless. There were no aggressive strikes, no surprise attacks, and no provocation of other species. Their goal was not war, but autonomy. By exercising control over the situation and presenting a rational, reasoned stance, humans maintained moral and strategic high ground. This approach demonstrated a sophisticated understanding of power. True strength does not require immediate aggression but can be expressed through preparation, communication, and the ability to act decisively if necessary. The breaking point also highlighted humanity's organizational and technological advantages. Fleets were strategically positioned, colonies fortified, and communication networks secure. Humans had prepared for multiple scenarios, anticipating potential responses from the Council and other species. These preparations ensured that humanity was ready to respond to any escalation, while maintaining stability within their territories. The combination of strategic foresight, technology, and diplomacy underscored a defining feature of humanity. They were capable of managing conflict intelligently, balancing assertiveness with caution, and turning a potentially explosive situation into an opportunity for independence. As the days and weeks passed following the renunciation, subtle signs of tension became more visible. Council representatives visited human-controlled territories to gauge compliance, fleets patrolled disputed sectors, and formal meetings were convened to discuss the crisis. Humans, however, remained composed and coordinated. Their public communications emphasized reason, fairness, and the desire for peaceful coexistence, while behind the scenes, leaders continued to strengthen defenses, coordinate colonies, and refine strategic plans. This careful dual approach ensured that the breaking point did not spiral into chaos but instead became a defining moment in human history. The breaking point also reshaped human society internally. Citizens and leaders alike were united by the understanding that this moment represented a turning point. Public morale was high, fueled by stories of resilience, innovation, and the right to self. Education, media, and leadership messaging emphasized strategic thinking, adaptability, and the importance of independence. This cultural reinforcement ensured that humans were not only prepared, technologically and militarily, but also mentally and socially ready to navigate the challenges of asserting autonomy in a complex interstellar environment. The Council, meanwhile, struggled to adapt to the new reality. Their assumptions of compliance had been shattered, and their strategies for control were proving ineffective. Some members began to appreciate humanity's strategic sophistication, recognizing that pushing too hard could trigger conflict they were unprepared to manage. Others continued to advocate for punitive measures, frustrated by the realization that centuries of established authority were being challenged by a young, unpredictable species. This internal division weakened the Council's ability to respond decisively and highlighted the profound miscalculation they had made regarding human nature and capability. By the end of this phase, the breaking point had fundamentally altered the balance of power. Humanity had successfully demonstrated that compliance with the Council was no longer automatic, asserting a level of autonomy that few civilizations had achieved so quickly. The move was calculated, controlled, and strategically timed, ensuring that humans could maintain both credibility and security, while sending a clear message to the Council and the broader galaxy. Humanity would no longer be constrained by authority that did not serve its interests. In conclusion, the breaking point marked the moment when humanity transitioned from cautious engagement and rising tension to active assertion and strategic independence. It was a defining moment in their rise as a galactic power, showcasing their intelligence, planning, and courage. By renouncing the treaty, asserting autonomy, and preparing strategically for any potential response, humans had changed the rules of engagement across the galaxy. The Council, once confident in their ability to control a young species, now faced a civilization that was capable, determined, and unwilling to be constrained. The breaking point set the stage for the next phase, the resolution, where humans would consolidate their independence and redefine their relationship with the Galactic Council and the wider galaxy. After humanity's bold renunciation of the Council-mandated treaty and their public assertion of independence, the galaxy stood at a critical juncture. Tensions had reached their peak, and the situation that could have easily escalated into full-scale conflict now required careful management, diplomacy, and strategic thinking from both sides. Humans had demonstrated their autonomy and preparedness, and the Galactic Council, though initially shocked, had begun to realize that force alone would not resolve the situation. What followed was a complex process of negotiation, mutual recognition, and cautious reconciliation, which ultimately shaped the resolution phase of this interstellar confrontation for humanity. The goal was clear: assert independence without triggering unnecessary war, maintain the credibility of their claims, and secure a position that would allow them to operate freely in the galaxy. To achieve this, human leaders relied on a combination of strategy, communication, and demonstration of capability. They had spent years preparing for the possibility that the Council might react harshly, and every colony, fleet, and diplomatic envoy was ready to respond with precision. Yet, despite this readiness, humans were careful not to initiate aggression. They understood that strength lay not only in technological and military superiority, but also in the ability to control escalation and guide outcomes toward a favorable and peaceful resolution. The initial steps toward resolution began with careful dialogue. Humans opened channels of communication with the Council, emphasizing their willingness to engage but only on terms that respected their independence. They framed their arguments around fairness, strategic necessity, and mutual benefit, rather than conflict. This approach was deliberate. Humans wanted to show that they were rational, reasonable, and capable of constructive negotiation. By presenting themselves as a competent and responsible power, they not only strengthened their own position but also forced the Council to reconsider its assumptions about humanity. The Council, for its part, was navigating a delicate situation. On one hand, they needed to assert authority to maintain credibility with other civilizations. On the other hand, they could not underestimate humanity's capabilities or risk provoking a war that they might not be able to control. Internal debates raged. Some members advocated for immediate sanctions or military demonstrations, while others pushed for a more measured approach, recognizing that humans had the knowledge, fleets, and alliances to resist. This division slowed the Council's response but also created an opportunity for humans to shape the resolution on their own terms. Humans leveraged this period of uncertainty to further strengthen their position. They continued to enhance their fleets, fortify colonies, and expand strategic alliances with other civilizations. These alliances were framed as partnerships rather than military coalitions, emphasizing trade, technological collaboration, and shared interests. By building relationships outside the Council's direct influence, humans created a network of support that served both practical and strategic purposes. This network allowed them to operate independently while demonstrating to the Council and the galaxy that humanity's rise was not a threat born of recklessness but the result of careful planning and intelligent governance. Diplomacy that remained a central tool in achieving resolution. Humans engaged in direct negotiations with Council representatives, presenting detailed proposals that addressed the concerns of both sides. They acknowledged the Council's role in maintaining interstellar stability, but insisted that their autonomy and sovereignty could not be compromised. Each negotiation session was carefully prepared, with teams analyzing potential objections, alternative solutions, and contingencies. Humans aimed not merely to reject the Council's demands but to offer pathways for cooperation that respected mutual interests. This approach helped reduce the immediate risk of conflict and opened the door for compromise. A key element of the resolution was the demonstration of human capability. While humans were careful not to provoke aggression, they ensured that the Council was aware of the technological, strategic, and logistical resources at their disposal. Fleets were positioned in defensive postures, colonies maintained operational readiness, and communication networks highlighted their reach and coordination. This demonstration served multiple purposes. It reassured humans themselves, communicated seriousness to the Council, and established credibility in the broader interstellar community. By showing that they were capable of defending themselves, humans shifted the Council's approach from assumption of compliance to recognition of partnership potential. Negotiations eventually led to the creation of a new framework for interaction. Humans were formally recognized as an autonomous power with the right to manage their colonies, explore new systems, and establish trade and alliances on their own terms. At the same time, mechanisms for communication, coordination, and collaboration with the Council were established. These mechanisms emphasized voluntary cooperation rather than coercion, signaling a shift from traditional hierarchical governance to a more flexible, mutually respectful system. Humans had achieved a position of independence while maintaining a functional relationship with the Council, a balance that ensured both security and opportunity. The resolution phase also included measures to address past tensions and prevent future misunderstandings. Humans in the Council agreed on protocols for dispute resolution, trade management, and territorial claims. These protocols were designed to respect human autonomy while providing avenues for peaceful negotiation in case of disagreement. By establishing clear, enforceable guidelines, both sides reduced the likelihood of accidental escalation and created a framework for long-term stability. The process demonstrated humanity's commitment to responsible governance and the Council's willingness to adapt to new realities. Throughout this phase, humans emphasized the importance of reputation. They sought to present their actions as principled and reasoned rather than rebellious or aggressive. By carefully framing their decisions and communications, humans reinforced their credibility not only with the Council but also with other civilizations across the galaxy. Stories of their measured, strategic approach spread, influencing perceptions and establishing humanity as a capable, respected, and independent power. Reputation, after all, was as critical as fleets or technology in interstellar politics, and humans understood that how they were perceived would shape opportunities and alliances for decades to come. The resolution was not a sudden event but a gradual process. Over months, communication, negotiation, and subtle demonstrations of capability combined to shift the balance of power. Humans maintained consistency, avoiding rash moves, and showing patience and restraint. The Council, recognizing the futility of coercion and the advantages of partnership, gradually accepted the new reality. The process highlighted a defining feature of human strategy: the ability to combine patience, foresight, intelligence, and assertiveness to achieve objectives without unnecessary confrontation. Citizens, colonies, and leaders saw the tangible results of careful planning, unity, and strategic foresight. The successful assertion of independence boosted morale, reinforced a shared sense of purpose, and validated the years of preparation and investment in technology, alliances, and diplomacy. Human culture increasingly emphasized self-reliance, strategic thinking, and responsible power, shaping a society that was ready to face the challenges of an interstellar future in the broader galaxy. The resolution set a precedent. Other civilizations observed that humans could assert autonomy while remaining cooperative partners. The Council itself had to adapt, recognizing that its traditional methods of control were not universally applicable. Policies shifted to allow more flexibility, and mechanisms for negotiation became more collaborative rather than coercive. Humans had effectively changed the rules of engagement, showing that a young civilization could rise to prominence through intelligence, preparation, and strategic diplomacy rather than through blind obedience or aggression. Humanity had achieved a balance that was both rare and remarkable. They had secured independence, ensured the protection of their colonies, and established a framework for peaceful interaction with the Galactic Council. At the same time, they had maintained credibility, forged alliances, and demonstrated strategic sophistication. The galaxy now recognized humans as a power capable of shaping their destiny while participating constructively in interstellar politics. Human leaders and citizens alike considered the lessons of negotiation, strategy, and patience. They understood that true power required more than fleets or technology. It required foresight, communication, and the ability to act decisively when necessary. Humanity had learned to balance assertiveness with diplomacy, independence with cooperation, and ambition with responsibility. These lessons would guide future generations, ensuring that humanity's rise in the galaxy would be sustainable, respected, and influential. Ultimately, the resolution marked the transformation of humans from a rising species under the shadow of the Galactic Council to a confident, autonomous civilization with a respected voice in the galaxy. It demonstrated that assertiveness, careful planning, and intelligent negotiation could achieve outcomes that force or aggression alone could not. Humanity had turned a potentially explosive confrontation into an opportunity, securing independence while laying the foundation for a stable, prosperous, and respected role among the stars. Asterisk, therefore, was not merely a settlement of disputes, was a defining moment that established humans as a major player in the galaxy. Through strategic diplomacy, calculated demonstrations of capability, and careful negotiation, humans achieved a balance that ensured their security, autonomy, and future growth. The Council, though initially challenged and surprised, had learned to respect and accommodate the rise of a species that had proven itself capable of shaping its destiny without succumbing to traditional authority. In this way, resolution was both a conclusion and a beginning, a moment of triumph, opportunity, and promise for humanity's journey across the stars. Asterisk, the resolution of humanity's conflict with the Galactic Council was a monumental moment, but it was only the beginning of a new phase in the story. Once the immediate disputes had been settled, once the treaties and agreements had been established, and once independence had been recognized, humanity entered a period of reflection and strategic consolidation. This phase, the aftermath, not simply about celebrating victory or asserting dominance. It was about understanding the lessons learned, preparing for the future, and solidifying the foundations of a civilization now fully aware of its own strength and potential. In the days and weeks following the resolution, humans across the colonies and home systems took stock of what had been accomplished. Leaders, diplomats, scientists, and citizens alike reflected on how far humanity had come. They considered the careful balance they had maintained between cooperation and defiance, between diplomacy and preparedness. They understood that the breaking point, while dramatic, had been the result of decades of planning, technological advancement, and cultural evolution. Humans recognized that the victory was not accidental. It was earned through strategy, foresight, and the ability to act decisively when circumstances demanded. One of the most significant aspects of the aftermath was the realization of human identity on a galactic scale. For centuries, humans had been confined to Earth and nearby systems, grappling with survival, exploration, and expansion. Now, their actions had demonstrated that they were a species capable of independent thought, strategic planning, and influence in the larger interstellar community. This new awareness transformed human culture. Citizens across colonies began to take pride in their achievements, not in arrogance, but in the knowledge that humanity had earned its place among the stars through intelligence, courage, and resilience. This collective confidence became a driving force for future development, innovation, and exploration. Technological consolidation played a crucial role during the aftermath. During the conflict and the resolution, humans had rapidly advanced their fleets, defense systems, and communication networks. Now, in the period of reflection, they focused on integrating these advancements into a coherent framework for long-term stability. Fleets were reorganized, colonies upgraded, and research initiatives prioritized to ensure that humanity's technological edge would be maintained and expanded. This consolidation was not purely defensive. It was a proactive effort to prepare for future opportunities, whether in exploration, trade, or potential conflicts. Humans recognized that the galaxy was vast and unpredictable, and the ability to respond quickly to challenges would define their success in the centuries to come. Diplomacy, too, underwent a transformation in the aftermath. Humans had learned that negotiation could be both a tool and a shield. They had mastered the art of using reasoned argument, transparency, and moral credibility to achieve strategic goals. Moving forward, human diplomats refined their methods, creating protocols that allowed them to engage with other civilizations without compromising autonomy. They developed a reputation for fairness, intelligence, and rationality, establishing trust while retaining the ability to act independently. This approach ensured that humanity's voice in interstellar affairs was respected, even by civilizations that were skeptical or wary of their rapid rise. The aftermath also involved strategic reflection on alliances and relationships. Humans had cultivated partnerships with civilizations that were neutral, supportive, or slightly skeptical during the conflict. Now, these alliances became more formalized, creating networks of trade, defense, and cultural exchange that strengthened human influence. By fostering mutual benefit and cooperation, humans ensured that their independence did not isolate them, but instead positioned them as a central, respected player in the galaxy. These relationships also provided redundancy and resilience. In an unpredictable galaxy, having reliable allies was as critical as having strong fleets or advanced technology. Leaders convened councils, conferences, and strategic think tanks to analyze the conflict, the breaking point, and the resolution. They examined what strategies had worked, what assumptions had been challenged, and where human society could improve. This period of introspection was crucial. It allowed humans to institutionalize knowledge gained through experience, ensuring that future generations would benefit from the wisdom of those who had navigated the crisis. Education systems incorporated lessons on strategy, diplomacy, and interstellar ethics, cultivating a citizenry capable of sustaining humanity's independence and influence over the long term. Economically, the aftermath brought both opportunities and challenges. Human colonies, having asserted autonomy, were now free to manage trade, resources, and industry without interference from the Council. This newfound freedom allowed for rapid economic expansion, innovation, and diversification. However, it also required careful management. Humans had to ensure that competition between colonies did not lead to internal conflict, and that resources were distributed efficiently to support both growth and defense. The lessons of preparation, coordination, and strategic planning became central to economic policy, shaping a system designed to support both stability and innovation. Culturally, the period following the resolution was transformative. Stories of courage, strategy, and independence became central to human identity. Celebrations, historical accounts, and educational programs emphasized the importance of intelligence, resilience, and foresight. humans developed a shared narrative of rising from relative obscurity on a single planet to a recognized and respected civilization in the galaxy. This narrative reinforced collective identity, unity, and purpose, ensuring that society remained cohesive even as it expanded across vast star systems. Psychologically, the aftermath had a profound effect on humans. Citizens, especially leaders and those directly involved in diplomacy and strategy, developed a renewed sense of confidence. They had faced a powerful interstellar governing body, navigated a crisis without resorting to reckless aggression, and emerged with independence secured. This success fostered a culture of calculated risk-taking, strategic thinking, and resilience. Humans learned that foresight, patience, and preparation were as valuable as technology or force, and that moral credibility could be a powerful tool in interstellar affairs. The Galactic Council, meanwhile, had to adapt to a new reality. Their assumptions about human compliance had been challenged, and they recognized that traditional methods of control were no longer sufficient. While humans remained cooperative in areas of mutual interest, the Council had to accept that autonomy was now a defining feature of human civilization. Policies shifted to accommodate this reality, and communication frameworks became more collaborative. The Council, having learned from its miscalculations, now approached humans with caution, respect, and recognition of their capabilities. This change in perspective marked a broader shift in interstellar governance. Influenced directly by humanity's assertive rise, security remained a priority during the aftermath. Although the immediate conflict had ended, humans remained vigilant. Fleets were maintained at readiness. Intelligence networks remained active, and colonies continued to enhance defenses. This was not paranoia but prudence. Humanity had learned that the galaxy was unpredictable and that preparedness ensured both survival and leverage. At the same time, humans used this period to develop technologies that extended their influence and capability, such as faster communication networks, more efficient resource extraction, and enhanced exploration capabilities. This dual focus on security and advancement positioned humanity for both stability and growth. The aftermath also created opportunities for exploration. With independence secured, humans could pursue research, colonization, and trade without external restriction. Scientific initiatives expanded rapidly, focusing on deep space exploration, new energy sources, and interstellar communication systems. Colonies began to explore uncharted regions, seeking opportunities for resource acquisition, strategic positioning, and knowledge. Humanity's ability to operate independently allowed for bold ventures that had previously been constrained by Council regulations. Exploration became both a practical and symbolic extension of human freedom, demonstrating that autonomy came with responsibility and vision. Ethically and philosophically, the aftermath prompted reflection on humanity's place in the galaxy. Leaders, scholars, and citizens debated questions of governance, responsibility, and morality. How should a powerful species exercise autonomy while maintaining fairness and stability? How could humans balance ambition with ethics in interactions with other civilizations? These discussions were not abstract. They influenced policy, strategy, and education, ensuring that humanity's rise would be guided by principles as well as capability. The reflection period cemented a culture where intelligence, strategy, and ethical considerations were intertwined, shaping a society capable of sustaining influence across generations in many ways. The aftermath was a period of consolidation. Humans had proven their ability to challenge authority, negotiate strategically, and assert independence. Now, they focused on stabilizing these achievements, ensuring that the gains made during conflict and resolution would endure. Fleets, colonies, trade networks, alliances, and governance structures were all reviewed and reinforced. By taking stock and consolidating their position, humans ensured that the lessons of the conflict would translate into long-term advantage and sustainable growth. Finally, the aftermath was a period of forward-looking ambition. With independence secured and the Council recognizing their capabilities, humans began to plan for the future. They set goals for technological advancement, exploration, and interstellar influence, aiming not merely to survive in the galaxy but to thrive. The period of reflection reinforced a sense of purpose, unity, and strategic vision. Humans understood that independence was not a destination but a foundation, a starting point for a future in which they could shape the galaxy according to their own intelligence, ambition, and vision. And conclusion. The aftermath and reflection phase was not simply a calm period following conflict. It was an essential stage in humanity's rise as a galactic power. It involved consolidation of gains, reflection on strategy and values, strengthening of technology and alliances, and preparation for future opportunities. Humans emerged not only as independent but as capable, confident, and visionary, ready to navigate the complexities of interstellar politics, exploration, and growth. The lessons learned during the conflict and resolution shaped society, culture, and policy, ensuring that humanity's rise would be sustainable and respected. The galaxy now knew that humans were a force to be reckoned with, not merely for their technology or fleets, but for their intelligence, strategy, and foresight. The aftermath cemented humanity's place among the stars, transforming them from a young, ambitious species into a mature civilization capable of shaping its destiny and influencing the future of the galaxy. Humanity had claimed independence, learned invaluable lessons, and positioned itself for a future defined not by subservience to authority but by intelligence, strategic foresight, and the relentless pursuit of progress.